Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 31 of the Limitless TCG podcast, the podcast all about competitive Pokemon. I am your host, Connor Hayward, and joining me, as always, is Robin Schultz. How are you doing?
Hey, yeah, doing well. Been doing a lot of work on the background, some cool stuff. Hope I'll be able to show some of it soon. But yeah,
It's my favourite thing, because I know what this is related to. And your answers regarding the thing that it's also related to that I've seen have become slowly more positive, of people asking something, you'd be like, oh, I don't know, to the last one I saw was possibly. It's interesting. It's kind of fun to see it all progress. There was no episode last week for reasons that will become fairly apparent, because we'll have to discuss Players' Cup at some point today. Because I wasn't allowed to mention how I got on in the Players' Cup last week, because if the rules are, if you're part of the recording group, you have to make sure that, no spoilers get out. And I decided that there was probably no way we could reasonably do the podcast without me at least accidentally giving it away. I'm terrible at keeping that kind of stuff to myself. So, no podcast. It was much easier that way. So, before we get into the episode, because that's not the topic this week, we're going to go and thank everyone who supports us over on patreon.com/limitless TCG there. It's probably the best way to support us. It's like the most direct. You can basically pay direct to us. Patreon take a fairly small cut compared to everyone else. And lets us do all the cool projects, like things that Robin's working on in the background. Though he was going to do it anyway, mostly because I know the real reasoning for what it wants to do. But if you can't afford to support us monetarily, you can just leave us a review on iTunes. Or, and I was actually thinking about this more, if you enjoy the podcast and you have a friend that you think might enjoy the podcast, bug them into listening to it. Send them a Spotify link or an iTunes link and go, yo, check this out. Because it helps us grow our listener base, which is just fun. We're trying to do this in a way that keeps it interesting for you guys. But with all that said, this week's podcast episode is mostly going to be about pre-rotation Darkness Ablaze. Because I always love this time of year, because you get like 2 formats in quick succession of the pre-rotation, and then 2 weeks later, whole new format, because you lose a load of cards. And I think that's going to be really apparent this year, because I think a few of the decks that are good for the Pokemon Online Global Championship, or potentially for the Players' Cup final, which I assume is going to be new set, then...
Yeah, probably gonna be. Yeah. I would be super surprised if it wasn't.
I mean, from a marketing perspective for TPCI, it's free, hey, here are the new cards, right? You do that.
It would make zero sense to not have Darkness Ablaze there.
But I think some of the decks that you would play for that kind of tournament pre-rotation are quite different to some of the ones that I would play post-rotation, personally. We lose a lot of very important cards.
Some decks, like Alternatives, will probably be good in both formats, but a lot of decks just lose a lot to rotation, so meta will definitely change.
Yeah, I mean, the deck that sticks out in my mind, and probably what I would be considering playing, given the choice... if I was playing the Pog Champs, I would probably be looking to play Vikavolt or something along the Vikavolt line. Because I like Toad. Toad was a fun card. But this is a Toad that you can do more than 30 with at a time because you play E-Power. And that just seems like a good idea, Do more than 30. Also item lock. And with also Thunder Mountain and Tapu Koko, you can get your turn 1 item lock off basically guaranteed at that point. So I feel that that's probably a more consistent, and it's the thing it loses is the damage output, right? And if it still has decent damage output, this time round seems like an obvious pick.
Yeah, for pre-rotation, Vikavolt seems pretty good. After rotation, it loses Thunder Mountain, so it's much harder to attack turn 1. And lose electro power, so damage output get much smaller. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's gonna be good post rotation, but for the POC championships, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna play Vikavolt. Like this deck looks so cool. Like it has like speed lightning energy and the whole tag core Guzmahala engine. Like I just really like how those lists look like. I was looking at a few Japanese lists, and yeah, Vikavolt just looks like by far the coolest. And yeah, there's not gonna be too much time to test for a tournament because the cards like get on PTCGO 1 week before, and I'm not planning to drop like a lot of money to get like 4 Eternatus and 4 Crowbats immediately. Like I'm just gonna get like 4 Vika Vaults and play the deck. I'm pretty sure that's how it's gonna go. And yeah, what I really like about it also is that it should be good against Mill because you like you lock the Poké and like a lot of other cards. Like Mill / Control can probably do some things, but it sounds like a matchup with Vikavolt should win. And then also against Blacephalon, which is also not a deck I would like to take a loss to. It's also probably good. So Vikavolt's good against those two like kind of annoying decks, I guess. And against the rest, like I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it does well against like Eternatus or other big damage decks, but there's probably things you can do. Like it might be maybe slightly unfavorable against like those big HP, big damage decks, but yeah, I don't think it will be like too bad. So yeah, pretty sure I'm gonna play Vikavolt, even if it's maybe like a bit unfavorable against Eternatus. But yeah, I think it's like the deck is strong enough to do well, and it's also like I said, it's just really cool. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the biggest question mark I still have because I'm yet to play. I haven't found any way to test. I want to sit down to test some pre-rotation decks for Pog, and that's the biggest question mark I have. Is we also get Center Scorch V and VMAX in this set, which is basically like the next Welder deck. You know, it's a big fire deck that does a lot of damage, and I'm like, well, I don't know if Vikavolt beats that kind of thing because most of its draw comes through Welder. Okay, he has to hit the Welders, but you know, if you can get to your Welder, you don't really care anymore about the lock. So I feel that that's kind of a question mark I very much still have about the deck. I don't know if it ever beats 300 odd HP, but also one shot decks. So, I don't know.
Well, you don't need to trainer lock all game. You also have a second attack which does a good amount of damage. So you can like maybe item lock turn 1, turn 2, like do some damage, then take the KO with a second attack, and maybe go into your Raichu and like do like stamp, paralyze plays. Like I don't think you don't just go straight item lock and 50 and then try to win that way while they do I don't know, 200 damage, even like with just the board and no hand, nothing else. And you will have to do like some different plays as well. Yeah, but like with the second attack and with the Raichu, I think be fine. They can also just buy some time to attach enough energies by like doing boss orders on something. And you also you can play Absol, so it's harder for them to retreat. So you can buy some time when attach energies to your other Pokemon that do more damage. And yeah, I think the deck has a lot of plays. So yeah, you don't need to just do 50 while that's not going to be enough against a VMAX deck with like a VMAX and a lot of energy.
Yeah, and I think that's, to be honest, I think that's we're gonna see a lot of that for Pogo because Eternatus is gonna be like the hot new toy. It's gonna be really hard to get hold of, but that's the deck that's got all the hype right now. Center Scorcher will probably see play because again, it's just a Welder deck, right? The Welder deck works because Welder's a card, and you just choose the thing that does the most damage for the least amount of energies, and there goes your Welder deck. So that's kind of cool, but I also think we're going to still see a lot of ADPZ is my expectation, because I think that has good matchups against other things as well. Those are like the decks that I think you have to target if you're going to play something like Vikavolt. I don't know off the top of my head how that ADP matchup is going to play out either, because they don't. Well, I guess they're kind of item reliant, right? Because of the sources. So I guess you can slow them down and then start taking one shots later in the game if you need to. But
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think the matchup should be doable. Vikavolt seems like a deck which doesn't really like with which you might struggle in every game, but you can also like play against everything, and yeah, you don't really take losses, I think, except maybe against like a Phalanx deck. I don't really see how you beat that.
see, now I'm not being funny, but I was literally having a conversation about Phalanx yesterday with someone, because we were like, well, okay, if you've got you don't use your PTCGO account often, and you want to set up something cheap, and maybe get a hard counter to a lot of the format, you pick your Phalanx up and you just jam it against the Vikavolts and the Eternatus, and you kind of accept your losses to Zacian. I don't think you win that matchup. The more I think about it, the worse that seems for Phalanx. And you can kind of get away with some other matchups, but
should be an auto loss probably.
Yeah,
I'm sure like it should be.
But if you get lucky and you hit everyone who's on the Vikavolt and the Eternatus hype, you can go on a deep run with the Phalanx boys, which I want to see on stream because I think that would just be hilarious.
It's probably also good against Pikarom, right? And Pikarom is, I mean, it should be still good.
Mm-hmm.
Might struggle with Eternatus, but other than that, it gains Crobat, so it can do turn on full blitzes a bit more consistently than now. And yeah, I mean, the deck is one of the best right now, so yeah, should also be good next format.
Yeah, I don't see Pikarom going anywhere for at least until rotation, and even after rotation, it's probably still good.
And one really nice thing about Pikarom next format is that you can put in a Vikavolt, and that kind of fixes your Blacephalon matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really helps in this matchup. Like Blacephalon is one of the biggest problems Pikarom has right now, and yeah, the one Vikavolt, it's a really good tech for the matchup, and it's also situationally useful against other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think the Vikavolt in Pikarom is really good. Not just Vikavolt as its own deck.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those cards because like Toad saw the same kind of play, right? Toad wasn't always just its own deck. Sometimes it was teched in as like a one-of Toad because you just double colorless and you could cheese a few games out here and there by just having it as an option.
Yeah, most decks that could play a Toad usually did.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes as like a semi-main attacker, sometimes just as a tech to like stall a few turns maybe. Yeah, I would expect Vikavolt to be played in like basically all Pikarom lists. Like Eternatus will be might be a problem for Pikarom because it should be pretty easy for that to just turn to KO Pikarom.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the deck's numbers work out really nicely for Eternatus. Like Eternatus just hits all the breakpoints with various degrees of success and like ease against Pika. Like it seems like it always seems to have exactly the right amount of damage. The only one that it struggles with is like if you big chum the Raichu and they have to get a lot of Zigzagoon pings on it, but they can still manage that.
Yeah, so that matchup might be like maybe like the hardest VMAX deck to deal with so far. But Eternatus, I mean, like I don't think card accessibility is like that big of a deal, but in this case, it's really only 1 week, and card prices are kind of crazy in the beginning, especially. And in this case, it's not just the 4 for VMAX line, which for Dragapult it was already super expensive, and now you need that 4 for VMAX line, and also for Crobat, which would be like kind of a new Dedenne and also very expensive. And like it's not like tournament is like the highest stakes ever. It's like I don't think people will really like some people will play the deck. Like some people just say, like, have everything on set release, of course, but I don't think many people will actually like buy into that, especially because it's not I don't think it's like that broken. Like it's still, for example, it loses against Mill, which I expect to be like at least decently played, because it's like the last tournament that Mill is yeah, just a thing at. And yeah, it also, like, Mill probably gets a bit better at this format because of like decks like Eternatus and Centiskorch, which don't have a lot of outs against it.
Well, and not only that, Bedabur and Bryson Man is a double-edged sword, specifically against Eternatus. If they're not playing any of the rods for Pokemon recovery, you just do the second effect once, discard off most of their bench, and then their damage output also drops. They're still probably taking one-hit KOs against everything in Mill, unless you promote the Zacian, but you can do that in such a way that then the Zacian can tank a hit if it needs to. So it does seem like that's going to be a rough matchup. And the decks that are looking to, like, Eternatus is a deck that wants to take KOs against GXs and VMAX, where it can trade favorably because it can almost always one hit KO or set up easy 2-hit KOs. So I feel that having to survive on, taking 6 prizes the old-fashioned way is not really how the deck wants to work, and I think it's going to really struggle there anyway. Centiskorch. Well, it depends on the build. Like, I've seen a lot of builds which are basically just for the 4 welder builds, and any of those just 4 welder decks have always struggled against Mill because it doesn't take too much for you to, like, they get one lucky Mill turn and you can kind of struggle. I guess, like, the only time I've seen, like, I can't think of any of the welder decks. I guess Ability Charizard was okay.
I guess if Centiskorch plays Ninetales, they should win. Unless Mill has Wobbuffet.
Yeah.
Like Centiskorch with, I don't know, Centiskorch with like 4 bosses order should actually be able to win. Like, one big thing is just being able to KO Zacian super early. Like, if you can turn to boss order, KO Zacian, that's it's really difficult for Mill to deal with because they need a few turns to get their engine going. And yeah, if you KO Zacian immediately, they usually have to, or like, either they have to put down a second one, which at this point gives up a lot of prizes, or they just kind of fall apart. And Centiskorch, being a fire Pokemon, it makes it a lot easier to just immediately KO Zacian. So I think Centiskorch, yeah, it might do fine. Like, Eternatus, if you play 4 boss, you probably have a chance. Like, depends on the list, but yeah.
Do you think that's something we're going to be seeing?
Decks, like Pikarom, if it plays like 3 bosses and on Eldegoss, which we usually do, they sometimes beat Mill, right? It's not incredibly favored for Mill or anything. It's kind of an even game, I guess. So if Centiskorch and Eternatus also play like very, very heavy boss, like Centiskorch could reasonably play 4 boss. Maybe I guess it wants to use a lot of welder, so I don't know if it really can do that. But if it did, it would probably be decent. If not, maybe if it puts in Ninetales, but then there's the problem of Wobbuffet. You can play Ninetales and boss, and then I'm not really sure.
Do you think that's something we're going to be seeing, that the Eternatus lists and some of the Centiskorch lists might be looking towards the more like high boss counts? 2 or 3 bosses have been standard right now, right? Do we think we're going to be looking at 4 boss in some of these lists?
Yeah, like in Eternatus, I could definitely see it. I mean, the deck has a lot of draw power of Crowbelt. And it doesn't need that much. Like, you need like a VMAX and 2 energy, and then some bench Pokemon. That's yeah, I think the deck should probably go pretty heavy boss. Yeah, you definitely need to respect Mill. Like, it's the last tournament it's gonna be legal at, and there's a lot of people that really like Mill and control decks. I think it's gonna be played.
Well, and Bedabur and Bryson Man is a natural card that kind of helps a bit against the The Eternatus deck to the point where I honestly wouldn't be massively surprised to see random tech Better and Bryson Man in certain decks just for the second effect, occasionally being enough.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be really hard to use it for that effect against Eternatus. Um,
But
yeah,
it also ends up being a
think
tech against Mill, right? Because if you're playing against Mill and they are only able to resource manage back a few cards, you can also get them back with your own tech Better and Bryson Man if you can hit it and keep it in hand. So that would be kind of an upsetting way for the Mill player to say goodbye to Mill in getting milled out themselves.
yeah, it makes them play a bit differently, probably. Also, they know that it's open decklist,
Yep.
I think so. You can't really surprise them, but they have having them play around it is pretty annoying for the mid player, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extra thing that you have to keep in mind in your mental checklist of I have to always make sure there's a pal pad so I can be at 5 cards left in deck so I'm always fine next turn. So
Yeah, and even then, yeah, Blair was probably a good and an anti-mid tech.
so
Yeah, against Eternatus, it's going to be hard to use it effectively. Usually, you have to play a draw supporter and can't really afford to discard 3 cards instead of like drawing cards with your supporter.
the thing
But
is
yeah,
you still get 2-hit KO'd, right? Like even if you get the full effect off for Better and Bryson Man, you're probably going to get 2-hit knocked out by the Eternatus anyway. And if you're spending the turn to set that up, are you really getting any value? Like, are you setting something else up yourself that same turn so that you can put pressure back on them? I doubt it. It seems like
and if you use it, you probably got 1-hit KO'd the turn before already. If they have like an 8 Pokemon on their bench, it probably just KO'd something of yours.
Yeah.
So that's like a situation where you usually need more cards and not less. But I don't really think Beleva and Bryson Man was ever gonna be a good like utility tech against Eternatus decks. So I don't think the ban really affects Eternatus too much. Like honestly, I think those 2 bans that we said, at least post rotation, I think they are just kind of pointless. I don't think either of those 2 cards would have seen any play.
So the 2 bans that we're talking about are the Better and Bryson Man has been banned, so post rotation, and also the Mismagius that lets you knock it out and draw it until you have more cards in your hand. So I think the Mismagius is actually being banned because it's a design space restriction. Because we had things like that card on its own kind of was responsible for the reset stamp possible lock. Like turn 1 play in expanded. It makes a lot of these like hand locked options possible because of how it manipulates prize cards. So I assume that ban was really so that they could print things like reset stamp and Mars and cards that let you manipulate your opponent's hand, but not in such a ridiculous way turn 1.
Well, the announcement literally said that with Crobat, a turn 1 Mismagius reset stamp can be too consistent and scary, but and first of all, it's even with the Den and Crobat, it's really hard to find even 2 Dusk Stones turn 1. If you go first, you can't even play a supporter, and then you're giving up 2 Mismagius, and you have to find reset stamp only to put the opponent to 4, which it's just a money. Like it's nothing crazy.
Yep.
Like if you go second, you can just play your money instead of having to do a whole reset stamp Mismagius combo. And you're never really gonna hit 4 Mismagius turn 1, maybe 3 at best, but even then, giving up so much to reset stamp someone to 3, it's hardly ever gonna be worth it, especially with cards like Jirachi and Zacian in format.
Yep.
So like if your opponent just has this one Zacian or Jirachi, they probably just like get out of it for free. Like I have a really hard time imagining any even semi-viable handlock deck in standard. Like in expanded, we had Zoro, Exodia, and I guess we didn't have the Miss Mages deck, but Japan had it. Like those had so many more cards
Mm-hmm.
than our standard format, like that made those possible. Like I don't think it would have ever mattered in standards. I'm kind of sad about the Miss Mages ban in a bit because I really like the card. I think the decks that played it were like really cool mostly. It's not the biggest loss because you can just play a Magneton instead.
Mm-hmm.
Because Duskstone didn't really ever matter too much. Like you played one Duskstone in Tina Chomp at most, and it was just like an utility for greens. But you like Magneton isn't actually worse than Miss Mages, I think. So yeah, those decks will probably be fine if they're like ever like if there's ever like I don't know a good partner, but it's just really weird in my opinion to introduce a band list like without like, a standard band list. We haven't had that for like I don't know 5 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just so weird to like do that now with two cards which like literally I don't think either of us made it even into like the third week of a Players Cup. Was there even a single I don't think there was even a single Miss Mages in the whole Players Cup, and Bryson Belva and Bryson Man was played like last format, but this format not really that much. Next format it would probably been like fine again, but then Orango rotates,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, that kind of problem is solved again. So I don't know. I guess I can see the Belva Bryson Man ban because Mill can be like some decks just don't really have good outs against it. But then again, with Boss Order, that's not even that true anymore. Like in the Sword and Shield format, some decks just couldn't really beat it. But now with Boss Order, I think almost any deck at least has a reasonable chance and can play against it. I don't even think it's like unfair to play against it. It's just like different than trading a lot of damage back and forth. So yeah, my opinion on the bans is kind of they are incredibly weird.
Well, yeah, it's preemptive at best. Is the way I was I'd phrase it is like at very best they prevent something happening that they didn't foresee in terms of testing, but that doesn't necessarily mean they should have been banned, right? Like I just feels that like they could maybe an errata or something like like to the effect of mismatches can't be done on your first turn. Done.
I mean, when Trump Card was banned 5 years ago, I don't know, we had a salesman called Shaman, which it literally won everything, and it was
Mm-hmm.
you just played mirrors all the time. Like it was basically like there were some other decks, but it was like S tier
Mm-hmm.
with like, and it wasn't particularly close. And now Mill might be a good deck, but it's just that it's a good deck. It's not better than all the other decks.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of good. So it's like I don't know why they would ban a card for that, especially because Pokemon is really a game where everything can be countered if you really want to. Um, like even the most degenerate expanded decks, you can usually build decks that beat them very consistently. If you have one very dominant deck, you can in Pokemon you can basically always build a deck that almost always beats them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just it's so weird.
I mean, I can see that. It's I don't know. It is an odd choice. But obviously these bans don't come into effect until after rotation. So maybe they've gone. It might be that maybe in the slightly more limited card pool, they're worried that decks have fewer outs to some of these cards and like the locks and stuff. I don't know. I just think it's a bit weird.
Yeah, like it won't matter because the cards. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think we would have seen much of them. There would have been a lot of tournaments probably where they wouldn't have been played anyway.
Hmm.
So I think it will just confuse some maybe newer players. Like, oh, there's a banned list. Apparently, you have to pay attention to that instead of just these are the sets that are standard legal, and you just build a deck with those. So I think it's just it won't actually matter. It's just like confusing.
Yeah, it's just an unnecessary extra layer to have to deal with, especially because like you already have to deal with like the idea of rotation as a new player, and if it's rotation, so you lose a load of sets, but also you lose two other cards that were in those sets, but you lose those at the same time. It's like this is kind of complicated now, but it's going to be interesting. So we spoke a bit about cards, like so we've mentioned that Eternatus is probably going to be pretty good. We've mentioned Vikavolt and Santa Scorching kind of passing. Santa Scorch, but my habit with Santa Scorches is not very interesting to talk about because it's like literally every other Welder deck ever, but now it's got a stage 1 in it. Like it's just boring. So
like the attack is like a bit more interesting than just doing damage. Like
we get to attach the extra energy so you can do even more damage next turn. Like, that's great. I find like this is not like if people enjoy playing Welder decks, and Robin, you obviously had quite a big success playing a Welder deck. I just find them so boring because it's basically just revolves around: do I have Welder? If no, can I get Welder?
Well, Welder decks usually have a lot of different attackers, at least. Like, it really depends on the deck, but
yeah.
I think like Ability Zard and Welder Mewtwo were two very cool decks, and yeah, I'm not sure how Centiskorch will turn out. I'm not even sure what it's going to be played with. Like, you might just play, I don't know, 4/4 Centiskorch and just some support Pokemon, but you could also play it more like Firebox. See, I don't know. I think it might be the best Welder deck, both pre and post rotation. At least like a multi-prizer Welder deck. So I don't think Rishizard is that good anymore. With VMAX around, and single prize Welder deck, well, like Blacephalon is probably still better than Centiskorch, at least post rotation. Not sure about pre rotation because Vikavolt is a problem. But post rotation, like Blacephalon loses almost nothing. It loses just like Fiery Flint and its stadiums. But you can play Giant Half and maybe even Energy Spinner instead, so it shouldn't be too big of a deal.
No,
So
I think it survives fairly intact. Like you just change out a couple of cards for what could be argued to be better, or in some cases, because like actually, Giant Hearth you can use if they can't count a Stadium U, the Giant Hearth sticks, which means that you've got another 2 fire energy if you need it the turn after. So,
yeah, what's gonna be more difficult is KOing some like things early, like a turn 2 KO on an ADP might be really hard to get without Fiery Flint. And if the ADPZ becomes really popular after rotation, which it might, that might be a problem for Blacephalon because if you don't KO the ADP immediately, you just lose. So that might be a problem with Fiery Flint rotating, but in general, I don't think the deck really cares too much if it has like Fiery Flints or Giant Halves in the deck. It's more or less the same.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a deck, and it's gonna be a deck that is gonna see play again in the Pog Champs because it's just actually surprisingly consistent. It's very strong, and it has favorable matchups against all of these VMAX decks because taking 3 prize cards with a single prize card attacker is kind of gross.
Yeah, it should beat Eternatus. It should beat Centiskorch, of course. Yeah, like, but I would never play Blacephalon for Pog, honestly, because like you don't really beat Mill, and you probably don't really beat Lightning decks, like either of the Lightning decks because of Vikavolt. So yeah, but it's I guess it's kind of a Blacephalon way. You just have very polarizing matchups.
Hmm.
Because like it was very popular in Sword and Shield, where it lost to Mill, but it did fine against other matchups, and it was one of the best decks still. But now it has two bad matchups probably, which might be a little too much. But then again, it still has its good matchups. So
Yep.
I would expect some people to play it, but I personally I would not touch it pre-rotation, but post-rotation, it sounds kind of nice.
See, I have
But
a general rule, which is basically the Greninja Rule, which is even if I think the deck is good, I'm not allowed to play it because it won't be good when I try and do well with it, and then I'll hate it. So even if I think Blacephalon is a good deck and is actually quite consistent, I'd never take it to any tournament at all on principle, because I know that if I then did really poorly in that tournament, because I probably played poorly, but I'd blame the deck too much. It's the same approach I had with Greninja. If I prized all my Froakies, kind of thing. So that's kind of my philosophy with Blacephalon. But I think it's good. It's a fine pick. Vikavolt is a pain, but
I'm not sure if you can do stuff against Vigavolt. I guess probably something, but it sounds really difficult.
I mean, you basically the Vikavolt just turns off all of your current energy recovery, right? There's no supporter based energy recovery to hand. I guess you could play Fisherman, I guess.
You probably have to play it a bit more welder box style
Mm-hmm.
and put in more alternate attackers. Like Victini V was played in Blacephalon for a bit, and it's pretty good. And I think something like a Dubwool V, like that thing walls Vikavolt pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like you should probably put in a Dubwool or something into your Blacephalon deck, and then if you play against Vikavolt or like some Lightning deck, um, maybe you just try to attack with that. Yeah, like you probably play it more like a bit more different fire attackers and not just like all in on the Blacephalon plan.
Yeah, which I think is fine. Like Victini hits the numbers at least for Vikavolt, unless they play Big Charm, in which case you don't anymore. But I think you hit the numbers quite cleanly with Victini to be able to one hit knock out a Vikavolt, which can be enough, I reckon, to keep that matchup from spiraling too far away from you.
I have Victini Prism. You can also recover fire energy without your crystals, which is nice.
Yeah, and okay, they're into deck, but then between the Zacian and the Aracario, you can probably draw back into a load of them pretty quickly. So
if you play like a Victini Prism, a Victini V, and a Dubwool, I mean, you can probably beat Vikavolt. I don't know.
mm-hmm.
Would have to try it out, but yeah, definitely you need to prepare some kind of plan to deal with Vikavolt.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if you played Victini V, you have a good attacker against Mill as well. Like I know the matchup was never good, but I think Blacephalon, if you went aggro Victini V, sometimes you could like steal a game against Mill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's a cheap enough attacker to get away with it, sort of thing. But do we think that's probably something that is going to be true anyway, right? Of no matter what deck you're playing, you really should think about Vikavolt. It's like one of the most disruptive cards that you're probably going to run into in a long time. It's the one card that we haven't had. We haven't had something like this in a while, which really forces you off your normal game plan for a lot of decks. Like if you're any deck that's kind of item reliant, it forces you off that. If you're using scoop up nets to move Jiraachis around a lot, forces you away from it.
Well, you still always get one turn of items at least,
Mm-hmm.
and like the first turn is the most important one for your items because you can play Quick Ball and I don't know, Treasure to search your basics. And then VMAX Pokemon don't need that many items after that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, like Vikavolt, I don't think it will be able to do to do it like Toad back in the day, where you literally just Quaking Punched all game. because nothing really one killed your Seismitoad or yeah. Also, you had different like disruption options, and also of course a lot of it was with trump card.
Mhm.
Like, but when Seismitoad was the most dominant, it had a trump card, and you could just like infinitely recycle your crushing hammers and your super scoop ups. So those were like completely different like tools that you had compared to like Vika Vault today. Like it's gonna be comparable. It's still like a quick item lock, but yeah, I don't think we will see like just straight disruptive Vika Vault with like I don't know hammers and like something that would resemble the like something like Seismitoad Garbod or Seismitoad. I don't know, something else like yeah. Vika Vault I think will be like kind of like a Picarom deck almost, just that you don't full blitz, you just like you do some item log 50, but you still play a lot of the same cards as a Picarom deck these days.
Yeah, instead of just trying to be more aggressive and beat people down before they get set up, you just stop them from getting set up at all because you're stopping their items for longer. Is kind of the plan, I guess. Like very much otherwise the same plan, but done at different speeds.
Yeah, you in the late game you will still have to do a lot of attacking for bigger damage and doing spam stuff, like I would expect.
Yeah, but so the other deck I mentioned it briefly earlier that I think is going to be pretty good for Pog is ADPzation. ADPZ is pretty strong. The ability to take 3 prize cards fairly easily. 260 is actually a really good number. It obviously you're not one hit knockouting the VMAXs, but it's not the end of the world because you can do hit into second hit later for 4 prizes still. You know, the same thing that we've seen it do now. But there is a variant that I haven't tried, but I kind of want to because it seems really greedy. But playing the new Turbo Patch, I think it's called, the coin flip, which means you can actually get your GX attack off on turn 1, so you can get Altar Creation turn 1, which is gross. So I think that's an option, but I also think it's just a really good deck. 280 hit points on a 3 prize attacker is fine. And if you're playing things like now we lose a lot of the the tool slot opens up a little bit, I think, in the deck because you don't really need you don't need goggles anymore because Dragapult's gone.
Well, I think Dragapult is still a fine deck. It's really like I don't think it will be played much because people are scared of Eternatus. But yeah, I don't think Eternatus will be the most played deck. And Dragapult is still like I think it should be good against Vika Vault. It should be still good against Mill Control and against a lot of other decks. So I think Dragapult could still be reasonably played. It has one really bad auto loss. And if you run into a lot of Eternatus, yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's gonna feel bad.
But I think Dragapult is currently it's the best deck. So
I just think I'd be put off taking it to the event because even though it's one bad matchup, it's the most hyped deck, which means I'd expect to see a lot of it, even if it's hard to get hold of in a week. I feel that it's going to be a rough kind of a tournament for it to be in anyway. And even if you don't, the other VMAX decks now are in position to be able to one-hit KO it. Like, Center Scorch can get there. It requires a lot of attachments, but it can get there. Then you're kind of losing.
Honestly, Dragapult is my second choice for the tournament after Vika Vault. Like, if maybe like people cut their Melolana from their decks because Eternatus one-hit kills anyway, if you don't have to worry about Dragapult that much, that's kind of cool for Dragapult. And like I said, I don't think many people will play Eternatus. Like, of course, there will be some, but even maybe some people that would like to try it are like, probably not worth it. I'll just play a cheaper deck. So, and Dragapult, yeah, like I said, it still has a lot of good matchups, and it's just an inherently very strong deck. I don't think I will play it just because I like Vikavolt. But if I tried Vikavolt and I just can't ever beat any VMAX deck, then I might just switch back to Dragapult. I don't know.
Okay, but you're playing Vikavolt, and you're worried that people might be going budget deck. What's your plan when they slap down a Decidueye and go?
And Decidueye, I think pre-rotation you can just beat Decidueye with Vikavolt. So first of all, you with Electro Power you can Boss's Order KO the Dartrix.
Mhm.
So you can like KO at least like a few Rowlet and Dartrix, and then with Electro Power your Tapu Koko can also one-hit KO a Decidueye. So even if they get Decidueye, which probably they do because the stadium is really broken, they don't care about item lock that much. And they should be playing like 3 Dartrix at least.
Mhm.
So if they play a decent list, they can probably set up a Decidueye, but then you just like go Tapu Koko, attach a giant cape maybe, so it's like really it has a lot of HP, and then just some Electro Power and Money Kill Decidueye. So I think you should be able to beat it.
Okay.
And Decidueye, it can't ever beat Mill, like Control or Blacephalon. So Decidueye has a lot to enough to worry about for it to not be a deck you would face a lot, I think. So I'm not really worried about Decidueye.
Well, it's also a deck that has to worry about existing because it's a stage 2 deck, just by virtue of being a stage 2 deck. The stadium makes up for it a lot.
Problem.
But...
Like stage 2 decks can be really consistent as well.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is just that no stage 2s don't do enough.
Mm-hmm.
But if Decidueye, if you literally just have to set up one Decidueye, and and you win sometimes. So setting up one stage 2, especially when you have this incredibly broken stadium card,
Mm-hmm.
and you have cards like Jirachi and Rosa in format, it shouldn't be too hard to set up a Decidueye. And yeah, also you have access to counter gain, to so you can just attack out of nothing as well. The Decidueye honestly doesn't sound too bad. Main problem is just that it can't beat Mill because you can never even KO Versation, so they can just draw cards forever.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you just don't pressure enough. You don't do nearly enough damage. You can't ever beat the Mill/Control deck, I think. So that's a big problem. And any other deck that's like, I'm not sure how much Blacephalon or Spiritomb there will be, but if people play them, yeah, I don't think you ever beat them with the Decidueye.
I mean, it's basically a deck that's all about calling the format, right? And if you call the format and it's almost entirely V and G max, you're fine. If it's anything other than that, you're probably gonna have a bad time.
Well, the thing with like calling formats and such is that usually everything is like played to some extent. Like you might maybe like some deck might sometimes be played like, I don't know, 20% of a field, other tournaments like 15% of a field, but unless there's literally no viable deck which like can deal with the Decidueye, like you can easily get like slightly unlucky, hit like 2 mil in the first 2 rounds, and yeah, that's it. So yeah, most matchups will probably be favorable for the Decidueye. But yeah, it also depends, because like I said, I think Vikavolt and also Pikarom probably can do the same as Vikavolt. So yeah, I don't even know if you beat those decks that you're supposed to beat. But yeah, something like ADPZ, which I don't think has any outs to the Decidueye, that you should just auto win, unless they play some new non-jigs, like some new one price attacker. I'm sure. But yeah, I'm not really worried about the Decidueye for pre-rotation. Yeah,
post rotation gets way more annoying.
Yeah, but the card is kind of good. Like stopping both V and GX. I think that's really good.
Well, and I also
But
much prefer its design because the last card we saw in a similar style was as basic with the with the Hooper that had the same ability, and that felt like a bit too much because it basically forced everyone to always have an attacker because it was so easy to set up. At least with the Decidueye, they have to jump through a few hoops to get there. Um, Otherwise, yeah, I like having this kind of card in format with this kind of effect because it becomes a deck building puzzle for everybody else. If you should almost always keep something in mind, like you might hit one, so having a single prize attacker of some description is good. But that's also good because it means that a lot of the time the single prize attacker you choose can be good in other matchups. Like Eternatus can choose a Hooper, and the Hooper is good in other matchups. Eternatus will play, Center Scorch will play like Volcanion, I suppose, right? Like, and that's pretty good.
maybe like if Center Scorch plays a lot of Volcanion, yeah, then the Decidueye can't really beat that, I guess.
No, so I think that like having these options are available because it means that a lot of these single prize attackers have are good in other matchups, like the Hoopers, both Hooper, the new one that we're getting, and the older one are both good in other matchups. So I can see that being kind of nice for the format because it kind of encourages you to play a few of these tech attackers, which kind of creates more interesting matches in general. So I'm okay with that. I can get behind it.
Yeah, I think the Decidueye is fair.
So, do we think there's any other decks that we should mention?
Yeah, I think we've talked about most of the current
Mm-hmm.
decks. Like, yeah, Zacian ADP will, yeah, it will probably be around the same level as right now. I'm not sure about Conversation. It should be able to deal with Eternatus, probably. But yeah, I'm not really sure how that deck fits into next format. Like ADP gives the deck gives Station like some more options to deal with stuff. While Conversation is a bit more specific with what it can deal with. So yeah, we'll have to see. I'm probably not like I'm not planning to play Conversation into the unknown meta. Although I think it could still be fine. Like I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it too much. And I guess the other deck which we haven't mentioned much is Spiritomb, which I'm also not sure about. It should still be decent.
Yeah, it'll be fine. I don't think it's gonna be amazing because like even now it's dropped right off in terms of play. Like there's been so much less Spiritomb, even though it is still should be a good deck. It's
It
just
hasn't
seeing
been
less
played
play.
much in the Players' Cup, I think.
Not at all.
I think it was played about the same level as Mewtwo, which I mean I would have expected it to see a bit more play than that. But I guess people just kind of don't like Spiritomb anymore. Yeah, I think it's not as good as I don't know Dragapult or Pikarom, but it's still kind of good. So
I think it also suffers from that same thing of like it's not a deck I want to take into an unknown format. Of you choose a lot of tech attackers, like if you're gonna play Tomb Beasts, and
yeah,
choosing
I
which
don't know.
beasts you add.
It might struggle with Vikavolt as well.
Yep.
Because getting one KO'd by an item lock attack is probably annoying. And Eternatus, depending on how many like one prize attackers it plays, it could just trade those with Spiritomb. Like tank a hit with Eternatus and then just go into like tank with one prizes. I think I would play 4 for new Hooper in Eternatus and also for Spiritomb. Like just I don't know, play 8 little basics and then just attack with 4 all the time. Like, I don't know. It sounds reasonable. And that should give decks like Spiritomb trouble.
Yeah.
Well,
okay. So if that is, I think that's all the decks for pre-rotation. So for those who are planning on playing the Pokemon Online Global Championships, or the PogChamps, it is at the end of August. I will put a link to the tournament in the show notes again, so you guys can check it out. It's still free sign up, so you can go and get yourself signed up and settled in on the Discord channel. So, going to be exciting. It's the Replacement Worlds. So, Robin, any shout outs?
No.
So, I actually do. I'm actually going to go plug Stephane's article that he put on PokeBeach about what makes a healthy format or like a fun format. I'll also put a link to this in the description. If you haven't read it yet, do. It's a really interesting read. Really interesting insight to like a lot of the history of the game, formats that I haven't played in, and it's extremely well written, and kind of goes into some like game design aspects of Pokemon, which we don't normally get to talk about, and I think it's a really interesting look at not just the state of the game, but like how it can be improved. So I think it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. If you don't if you want to learn more about the history of how like the game evolved over time, it goes over like over the past 10 years and what decks were like played. Oh, it's like an interesting read, yeah.
So if you have some spare time, can heartily recommend checking that out. So with that, thank you very much for listening, and we will be back with post-rotation conversation soon.